So you brought up four really important notes, and we'll just get right into it. So you brought up four really important notes that are for somebody who has finished writing a book, has published the thing, and then is now trying to write a sequel. And when I said, "Hey, come on, we should do a recording for the next Legend Haven," and you said, "Well, here's four things that are really top of mind for you right now because I'm trying to write a book, but there's sort of the overwhelm of just everything." So we wanted to talk about publishing perseverance and how to get back in the saddle after your first book release. So you released Mark Maker 2 years ago, and I think you and I talked about it with our first Legend Haven, and I think it's gone on to do really well. I know that people have absolutely loved it from when I've spoken to them. Um, tell us where you're at right now. You're trying to write this sequel, and you mentioned these four things. Run through these four things if you would, and then we'll break them down.
Yeah, so you're now running a small business, whether you like it or not, whether anyone
Yeah.
warned you about that or not, that is what
Hmm.
you are doing. The experience of burnout that you can have
Hmm.
uh, after publishing the first book, and then the difficulty of like transitioning from that sort of publishing and marketing mindset back into a writing mindset.
Hmm.
So those two things kind of together. The third point was, well, the imposter syndrome, which you would think would get better after you published a book, but at least in my personal experience, and I've heard this from other authors as well. Uh, the imposter syndrome can actually get worse in certain ways after publishing
Wow.
the first book.
Okay. I'm not scared at all.
I don't know if it happens to everyone. That's just been my personal first experience.
Hmm.
Um, and then the fourth thing that I just wanted to talk about was uh, tips and things that I have found helpful for persevering in the writing
Okay.
and publishing space.
Awesome. Well, look, let's just get right into it. So, um, yeah, you're now running a small business. I mean, you thought you were in this for the funsies of writing about blue aliens or something, and now
Yes.
it's a small business. And I mean, did that surprise you, or how are you feeling about that now?
I guess it didn't surprise me so much as I didn't know all the details of what that would involve going in.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, some of the things I have, I'm published through a small traditional press. So some of the things they were able to handle and help me out with, like, um, sort of helping me out with my website, like helping me set up a store on the back end so I could sell, um, my own books and merchandise. So like I got some help, but also having to realize, oh, I now have to keep track of income and expenses.
Mm,
And
yeah,
that was not something I'd ever had to do before, beyond like for my day job.
yeah, yeah.
I
Mm.
have to keep track of all that stuff yourself.
In your case, are you physically mailing out the books, or is it print on demand?
So I get, yeah, so I keep a stock of copies
Hmm.
myself so I can sell signed copies from my website.
Okay.
So I generally order like a box of books, which I keep in stock, and then I'll mail them out
Nice.
whenever I get an order.
Okay. Okay. Wow. So, any recommendations for people, like preferred tools for making it easier or something? Or how have you kept your sanity this past year?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've been a little, it hasn't been, how to say this, it hasn't been too overwhelming on that front.
Hmm.
Um, just because, I don't have that many sales.
Yeah.
That's not an
Okay.
overwhelming amount, so it's not too much to keep up with. Um, but yeah, I found just like um, keeping track of my author income and expenses on a monthly basis,
Hmm.
like keeping a separate spreadsheet that's separate, from my personal budget,
Yeah.
to just keep track of those every month so that when it gets to the end of the year, being able to have all that information compiled already for
Hmm.
like tax season instead of having to go and find it.
Yeah.
um, I found that makes it more manageable. Um,
Gotcha. So you talked about it can feel overwhelming if you're not prepared for a mindset shift. What's been your biggest mindset shift as an author now kind of running a business?
I think it's just like being willing to learn new skills,
Yeah.
and being okay with that,
Hmm.
even if it's not necessarily what you signed up for. Um, and yeah, and also just like finding satisfaction in the moments that are kind of cool. Like, every time I get to pull out a book and sign it and, put it in the package and put it in the mailbox, like
Yeah.
that's always really cool for me. Like, ah, I'm doing this.
I'm a real live author. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's talk about then burnout and getting back to writing. Um, After releasing your first book, like, where have you been at and how have you been feeling?
All over the place.
Hmm.
um, yeah, the first couple of months were kind of a whirlwind. I was doing a lot of uh, like podcast interviews or author events, like Legend
Hmm.
Haven, and some other places, and sort of keeping in touch with readers and getting that first initial, uh, kind of reviews coming in.
Yeah.
So it was all very exciting, and that was kind of all that I was doing, and trying to be consistent on social media to like keep getting it out there. So after a few months of that, I was pretty burned out. So like I wasn't trying to write again during
Hmm.
that time,
Yeah.
because it was just too much to keep up with. Uh, and then when I did try to start writing again, it was surprisingly difficult.
Really?
Even things that I thought I was excited about, um, like it just wasn't like I felt like my writing brain didn't work anymore, which is very discouraging and scary for someone who wants to write more books.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Why do you feel or think that uh, felt so difficult?
I honestly, looking back, I think I just wasn't ready. Um,
Okay.
I think, I mean, it wasn't just, uh, like the week or the month of the book launch
Hmm.
that I was so busy. It was all the months leading up to that, the year and a half of intense editing and
Yeah.
revisions, and then like
Hmm.
the 6 months leading up to it of all the publishing processes, being involved in the cover design and proofreading and going back and forth on all the drafts to like
Hmm.
make all the little tweaks towards the end. So I'd just been in like sort of mental, like really in this space where you're really refining the book
Hmm.
and making it the best that it can be,
Yeah.
which is great. But
It's a lot of attention and that's
yes,
exhausting.
it is exhausting. So it's like, it's this marathon, which you finally gotten to the end of. And the fact that I expected myself to be back in the space where I could start a new story
Hmm.
and go back to like first draft mindset, which is very different.
Yeah.
um, I think like, I mean, maybe for some people it's, I probably everyone's timeline is different, but for me to expect that of myself and after only
Hmm.
2-3 months, was not realistic.
Hmm.
I was just too tired.
Yeah, I can imagine. Look, I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume you may be more introverted than extroverted. So you're burning a lot of energy in heck of a lot of communication and interaction with a lot of people over a long period of time, especially things like podcasts. And I don't know if you're how are you getting on podcasts and getting on the interviews? Were you like cold calling and outreaching to
No,
self promote?
I didn't do. I honestly didn't do that many podcast interviews. Most of the ones I got were through uh, people I knew
Okay,
who
your
happened
own
to have
network.
podcasts
Yeah.
and heard about my book. So most of them reached out to me, I think.
Okay.
So I only did maybe like 3 or 5 different interviews in that time, but that was still a lot for me.
Yeah, yeah, going from none to
Yeah.
a bunch. And again, I'm a bit more of an introvert myself, so like there's times where like I can't sustain that level of engagement with people for a long time, and it
Oh
does it
yeah.
wipes out your creativity. looking back at that period, um, any ideas what you would do differently for yourself?
Um, I mean, I'm glad I did it the first time that way, just like
Yeah.
experiencing everything. So I don't know if I would, but like thinking about, the next time around. Um, I don't know. I think probably the main thing I would do differently is just uh not beat myself up for
Hmm.
like recovering at the pace that I needed to.
Okay.
Because
Taking your own
that
time.
becomes a whole nother level of difficulty when you're already struggling, and then you're
Hmm.
telling yourself, "I shouldn't be struggling. What's wrong with me?"
Gotcha. Yeah. So
It
you
just
wouldn't put
makes
as
it
much
way
pressure on
harder than
yourself.
it needs to be. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So you got a note here. So you say, let yourself write what brings you excitement and joy. Is that something? Unpack that. Like you're looking back at yourself, then going through all of that. That's a piece of advice you'd offer yourself and others.
Yeah. So, well, what I ended up doing to actually get myself writing again. Um, so, obviously, once I released Mark Maker, pretty much everyone was asking me, "Oh, this was so good. Like, when's the sequel coming?" And so I, so I was thinking about it. I wanted to write a sequel. I certainly left it very open for one.
Hmm.
Um, but like I didn't really know where to start, or my ideas for the sequel were not yet developed enough that I
Hmm.
was excited about them.
Hmm.
Um, like I just didn't feel comfortable sitting down and trying to write it. I knew it wouldn't really go anywhere at that
Yeah. Yeah.
point. So what I ended up gravitating towards instead was I'd had this idea for a new character who would play a major role in the sequel.
Hmm.
Um, but partly because I was feeling intimidated by the sequel itself, just like the whole idea of starting it. I was like,
Yeah.
well, okay, I don't want to do that, but I'm excited about this new character. So I'll work on um, a short story about
Oh,
this
smart.
character's backstory,
Hmm.
which is still progress because I'm still getting to know the character.
Hmm.
Um, but it's not as mentally intimidating as the sequel itself.
Hmm. That makes
Um,
sense.
so over the past year, I actually ended up writing both a short story and a novella about this new character,
Oh, wow.
which helped me to get back into the habit of writing.
Hmm.
Um, and with a story that I was genuinely excited about, um, but it wasn't, it didn't have the same like intimidation factor
Hmm.
as the book itself. Uh, but now that I've written it, I have all this material to pull from.
Hmm.
Now that I'm actually started on the next book.
Yeah. Yeah. So you found a way to ease yourself back into it. So this ties, I think, to your point number three about having imposter syndrome after publishing your first book and how that didn't get any better. Can you what? Okay, unpack that one.
Yeah, this was something that I found kind of surprising, and yeah, I mean, your reaction probably other people will find it surprising too, um, because yeah, you would think that like, oh, I've finally done it, like the book is out there, I'm a real published author, which you are. All of that is true. um, but now that it is out there, there's sort of now like this objective standard of expectations.
Hmm.
Because before you're published, even if you're working with a publisher and your editors and everything, um, like it's not out there yet, for everyone to see. And so when it is out there and people start talking to you and treating you like a published author, um, it's I don't know, it's just like this whole other wave of expectations
Hmm.
from other people that you have to, you know, that you're like at a certain level of accomplishment and you can do certain things, which
Hmm.
you may or may not find like you may or may not feel that you are actually competent at those things at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
Like in some objective sense you are, but in your own head you can still feel like, okay, I just wrote this book, but did I really do that? Like, was that just a fluke? Can I really do that
Yeah.
again and again? I don't know. I'm so tired right
Mm-hmm.
now. So yeah, I actually found that, especially during that difficult period where I was trying to start writing again and finding it just so intensely difficult, you
Mm-hmm.
know, having these thoughts of, like, can I write anymore? I don't know what's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can keep doing this, which is a very, depressing thought again.
Yeah.
um, but sort of to be battling those feelings while at the
Mm-hmm.
same time people are, you know, congratulating you or praising you. It's just sort of this weird dichotomy to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So
so
what are some
yeah.
answers that you'll offer yourself, or things you'll tell yourself to keep going or get through it, or how are you navigating that?
um, yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of took some time to figure out. Uh, Again, one thing that was really crucial was just like being gentle with myself as a writer
Mm.
and saying, you're really tired. You just did this huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's okay if your brain needs some time to just rest and process
Yeah.
this whole experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, talking to other authors
Mm-hmm.
helped a lot, other published authors, and just kind of sharing those struggles. Um,
What would they say to you?
um, I mean, a lot of them would say that like this experience is very normal.
Okay.
Sequels in particular are notoriously difficult. I think they just have some unique challenges with being, um, they're kind of in the middle of a story,
Mm-hmm.
and so that really changes like where you start the writing process and how the story structure unfolds. And so it's just
Mm-hmm.
inherently going to be a different process than writing the first book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think coming to terms with that has helped the most. To
Mm.
just
Okay.
realize, okay, this book has felt a lot harder than the first one
Really?
to start.
Okay.
Um, but realizing that is not because there's anything wrong with me or that I'm suddenly a bad writer, but like, no, this is just different
Mm-hmm.
inherently, and it's just a new skill set to learn.
That's
Um,
interesting. I like how you
yeah.
put that, a new skill set to learn. And from my understanding of the sequel, I think you said you're introducing a new character or starting a new character. Is it like a continuation of the same story, or is it a whole new story set in a similar or set in the same universe?
It is a continuation of the same story,
Okay.
but yeah, without giving too many spoilers, basically I'm bringing in an additional point of view character, like an additional narrator who wasn't
Yeah.
in the first book at all.
Okay.
Uh, so it is a continuation of the same story, but I decided I wanted this new
Hmm.
perspective to kind of take a fresh look at
Yeah.
at the whole story.
Nice. Wow, that is interesting. I've got I'm in a similar situation with a novel that I'm writing, which has a sequel, and I'm like, well, I know how I want the story to begin, and now I'm realizing, wait, it's the sequel for like part two of a bigger story, but it has to run like it's own novel. It's got to have its own opening, inciting incident, and it's
Yep.
laddering up in three act structure. And it's like, oh man, I can't skate in on this one. Um,
Exactly.
so that creates a whole lot of thinking. Okay, so then you've got point number four, then tips for perseverance, and that's how you've been working through this. I don't know what you want to call it. It's not a slump. It's a time of rest, time of recuperation.
Yeah.
Um, and now you're easing back into the saddle. So
Hmm.
share with us, if you would, some of your perseverance tips.
Yeah. So, and I think I've mentioned a few of them already throughout our conversation. But one, just in terms of like the business
Hmm.
management side of things, to create systems or habits that allow you to maintain that easily. Um, so, like I mentioned, like, sitting down and like tallying up your income and expenses every month instead of, waiting 3 or 6 months to figure it out. Yeah, so just like creating those little habits or systems, so that it doesn't feel overwhelming when you finally get around to it. That can help with the business side of things. And then in terms of other things, for perseverance, again, one I've mentioned already, but is super important. Yeah, just like take it easy on yourself. You just published a book. That's amazing. But that's a hard thing. So yeah, the feelings of burnout and overwhelm, like that's normal. And even if you see other authors out there, on social media who just seem to do it all without any effort, like I promise you, that is not the case behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Other things which I found really helpful, sort of after that initial book launch, when you've kind of gotten through that busy season, let yourself take a break. As long a break as you need, it can be a month, a few months, 6 months, like whatever it takes. And do other things that you enjoy besides writing. Like let yourself put it down for a while, because otherwise the burnout will not get better. Like it just won't.
That's a good point.
And yeah, let yourself do other hobbies that you enjoy, spend time with family and friends, like just let yourself recharge as a person. Because it's very easy for us as writers to get wrapped up, like to get our identities wrapped up in our work. And that part I think actually does get worse when you get published.
Makes sense.
It's much easier to kind of fall into that mental trap.
Got to be butt in seat, staring at a blank page. Words must be coming out, or I am failing in my vocation.
Yes.
No, as opposed to like getting back out into life and with other people and being a human being that's filling yourself up and recharging with all the sorts of interesting things that you will then end up wanting to write about as well. Yeah. Okay. Good point. Gak, keep going. You've got a couple more little points here.
So when you do start writing again, give yourself small, manageable goals. So, don't start out with a crazy word count goal, because after burnout and after a long break, especially, those like mental gears are going to be rusty. And that's just the way the craft works. And there's nothing wrong with you if you find that difficult at first. You just need to start putting in the practice, even if it feels awful, but just, give yourself like the little manageable chunks. It's like, okay, I'm going to sit down for just half an hour and see how many words I can get in. Or I'm just going to write a sentence today and that's it. And that, if that's where you need to start, that's totally fine. It's still progress.
Yeah.
Other things I found helpful, finding a writing community that will support you during kind of,
and I think you're involved in a couple of different ones, aren't you? I'm just curious, what are they, and what does each one maybe contribute to you? How do they help you?
I think the one I'm most involved in right now that I found most helpful is the Inkwells and Anvils Discord group. They just have a very active community with great people.
It's quite amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think especially they have like these monthly events. Like a couple months ago, they had one it was like a world building and character challenge. So there was like a question every day about your world or your character, and you just try to answer the question as best you could. So like that was fun because it kind of got me thinking about my story again and excited to share it with people. Even if I wasn't actively, in a writing group yet.
Yeah, just got you moving again a little bit.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and then being able to like vent to other writers if you're really struggling with something, and nearly all of the time people will come back and say, I've had that experience. You're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, it doesn't always help you solve your specific plot problem necessarily, but just to hear that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you're not
Yeah, you're
bad
not
at this.
alone. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, we've all been here.
Mm-hmm.
It's very encouraging. So yeah, so find that writing community. That's really important.
Awesome.
Um,
And then readers and fans, like over this past year, have they nourished you or helped you in any way?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, just getting, sort of getting to know people um, because of the book, whether that's through social media and interacting with people or, through these writing communities that I've joined,
Mm-hmm.
or even just through friends and family who have read the book and then um, they'll either reach out to me or we'll maybe cross paths. They'll
Mm-hmm.
be like, "Oh, I read the book; it was so great." Um, so yeah, just enjoy those moments. Um, and I haven't done this myself, but I've seen other people who do it, and I think it's a great idea. To like keep a notebook or a binder or something of like all the like really nice reviews or sort of comments that you get from people or like direct messages that you get from readers about the book. Just like just compile those all in a spot,
Mm-hmm.
so you kind of have them and you can go back through them when you're feeling discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is easy to forget in those moments of burnout and discouragement. Like this does actually matter to other people. It's affecting other people's lives, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really heartening. For any writer to remember.
That's an excellent idea. I just store them up in my mind and then I end up forgetting them. But
Right.
having a list like that, no, that
Yeah.
makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Good point. Last thought that you'd like to leave with us then.
Um, I think, well, one thing that I'm doing right now,
Mm-hmm.
which I found very helpful for actually starting the sequel, um, is I've been taking a hiatus from like active marketing, especially social media,
Mm-hmm.
um, because, while on the one hand, that's kind of like the modern book space, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to be there. Um, and, I had a lot of fun with it for like the initial launch and kind
Mm-hmm.
of the year afterwards. But at a certain point, I was finding that it was taking a lot more from me than it was giving back.
Mm-hmm.
Especially after the initial excitement of the launch and sales and hype kind of naturally dies down after a certain point, and to try and keep it going artificially
Yeah.
when you don't actually have a new book yet
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work super well. So it was getting a little bit demoralizing to try and stay on there and keep creating content when I didn't actually have a lot to say at the moment.
Gotcha.
So I just told people I'm taking a hiatus so I
Mm-hmm.
can focus on writing the next book. I don't know when I'll be back, and I'm okay with that. And I have actually, because, when I go back and think about it, when I was writing the first draft of Mark Maker, I didn't have an author platform yet. I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
to worry about all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to put this aside for a while I'm working on the next book, because that's what people really want anyway.
Yeah.
That's what I want. So yeah, just don't, if you're at that point where you published your first book and it's out in the world, um, and you feel this pressure to be constantly marketing,
Mm-hmm.
um, you can step back. It's okay. Your readers who really care about you will still be there when you get
Mm-hmm.
back. And like, I haven't given up all marketing. I'm still doing my monthly author newsletter. So I am still communicating with my readers. It's just not sort of the hectic form of
Yeah.
being on
Yeah.
social media. So yeah, don't be afraid to step back if you need to. If that's what you need to do to actually be creative again, then 100% go do it with
Yeah.
no regrets.
Yep. Step back, shut off, get focused, allow yourself that space to be creative. So, talking about creative spaces, I think you're joining us for Legend Haven again this year, and so Friends, you can have a look at the links in the description right below this video. There's going to be a link for Mary's website, and you can check out Mark Maker and join her list, even though she probably won't say too much except for her monthly email. And then we've also got a link for Legend Haven. You can grab your ticket, and we are counting down to the con. I think you're hosting an event at the con. Is that right, Mary?
Mhm.
And what are you talking about? Or hoping to meet up with people on?
Yeah, so I'll be doing a read aloud of a chapter for Mark
Mhm.
Baker. Both for existing fans and also people who are new to the book if they want to hear about it. And then after the read aloud, I'll just be hosting kind of an open discussion chat, probably about some of the same things that we talked about here, like what it's been like publishing a book and sort of getting the sequel started. I'd be interested to hear people's thoughts about like some of the unique inherent challenges about writing a sequel, because that's something I have many thoughts about. Like, why are people so unhappy with many sequels sort of in like our modern media and pop culture? Like, why is this so hard to do?
That would actually be a really fun list of like 10 things we hate about any given sequel on any given
Right.
Tuesday or something.
Or like when there's a good sequel, like why is it good? Some just really interesting questions that
I really want to pick your brain on those. Like, we should come back and have that conversation. Friends, if you think we should, drop a comment. Let's have Mary come back and talk about 10 reasons sequels work and 10 reasons they don't, or something. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing people's thoughts on it too.